Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The sound of the zipper sliding upward was far too slow, far too deliberate. Every inch it climbed along the fabric of my blouse sent a shiver up my spine. His hand didn't stop when it should have. It lingered, steady, warm against my waist, pressing just a little closer than necessary. And in that pause, the air between us thickened, like we were both holding our breath, pretending this was ordinary, when it wasn't. He was in his 40s, my husband, familiar to me in every way, yet tonight he carried himself differently, as if he knew the effect he was having and chose not to hide it. His fingers brushed the hem of the blouse once more, grazing just enough to remind me he was still there, that I was still within reach. I could feel his breath, close, measured, as though he too was caught in this slow game neither of us had named aloud. I glanced up, and our eyes locked. Too long. Far too long. The look he gave me wasn't the casual glance of a husband helping his wife get dressed. It was sharper, heavier, carrying a weight that made me want to step closer and run away all at once. My chest rose and fell faster, betraying what I was trying to hide, and his lips curved into something between a smile and a secret. The room seemed smaller than it was, the walls bending inward, pulling us into a private circle where nothing else existed. His shoulder brushed mine, barely, but it was enough to set my pulse racing. And when he leaned, just slightly, almost unnoticeable, I felt the heat from him, the closeness, the temptation of what would happen if that space between us disappeared altogether. A silence hung there, alive with everything we weren't saying. My fingers curled into my palms, grounding me, but even then, his hand stayed at my waist, not moving, not letting go. For a moment, it felt like we were standing on an edge. One more second, one more breath, and we would tumble past it. But instead, he stopped. He didn't move forward, didn't pull me in, he only stayed there, close enough to burn, far enough to leave me aching with questions. His hand was still there, a quiet weight against my waist, when I turned just enough to face him. The zipper had reached its end, but he didn't step back. Instead, his thumb brushed against the fabric as though testing its texture, as though he needed one more excuse to stay close. I should have moved, should have broken the moment with a laugh or a light word, but I didn't. My eyes betrayed me, flicking downward for a fraction of a second to the line of his mouth. The way his lips curved, the way they hovered so close, it was impossible not to wonder how they might feel if the distance between us collapsed. His gaze caught mine again, sharper now. He noticed. He always noticed. And that was the danger. A quiet smirk played on his face as if he knew I was unraveling, as if he enjoyed holding the silence hostage. When his fingers finally left the fabric, they didn't retreat entirely. They skimmed up, slow, grazing the side of my arm through the sleeve before tracing the bare skin just below. I felt every ridge of his fingertips like sparks, tiny, deliberate fires. I inhaled sharply, and he tilted his head, amused by my reaction, though neither of us spoke. The air grew tighter. My laugh, soft and unsteady, slipped out before I could stop it. He leaned in closer at the sound, like a hunter drawn by movement, until I could feel the warmth of his breath at the hollow of my neck. It was dizzying, how close we were, how a single inch had turned into an invisible game of who would break first. But beneath the heat, a flicker of something else rose, jealousy. I thought of the way he'd laughed earlier that night with someone else, how easily his hand had lingered on a shoulder that wasn't mine. The memory stung, enough to add steel to the softness, enough to make me hold my ground. If he wanted this closeness, he'd have to earn it, not simply take it. That unspoken challenge hung between us, fueling the tension. And then, without warning, the moment tilted out of our control. A shift in the room, a stumble, a step too close, brought me against him fully, chest to chest, breath to breath. The world seemed to stop there, the line crossed by accident, or maybe not. And then it cut to silence. The brush of his chest against mine lingered long after I stepped back, pretending to adjust my blouse, pretending I wasn't unraveling. But I could feel him watching me, his eyes dragging over every movement like he owned the moment. My pulse hammered louder than my own thoughts, and still, I didn't look away. He closed the space again, not fully, just enough. A ghost of a touch skimmed the back of my hand, barely there, yet electric. I pulled in a sharp breath, my body answering before my mind could. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but instead he let the silence hang, daring me to break it. I didn't. Instead, I shifted, brushing past him, deliberately slow. My shoulder grazed his chest, and the contact was so subtle it could have been nothing, yet we both knew it wasn't. His answering smile was quick, dangerous, as if I had just played into his hands. The tension folded in on itself, a loop of almosts. His fingertips hovered near mine again, tracing the edge of my knuckle without fully committing. I held my breath, waiting, and then he pulled back, just enough to make me ache for the closeness to return. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice so low it was nearly a whisper against my ear. The words weren't a question, they were an observation, a quiet claim. My skin prickled where his breath touched, the heat of it sliding down my neck. I laughed softly, too quick, too fragile. "Maybe it's you," I countered, though my voice wavered more than I wanted it to. He leaned back just enough for our eyes to meet again, his expression unreadable but loaded. There was danger in that look, the kind that whispered of consequences, of lines that once crossed could never be redrawn. And yet, neither of us moved away. It was maddening, the rhythm we had built, a touch, a retreat, a pause, a return. Each moment stacked on the last until the weight of it pressed down, daring us to snap. And then he did something I hadn't expected. His hand, slow but certain, slid along my arm and stopped at my wrist. With a gentle but firm pull, he drew me back toward him, closer than we had been all night. I stumbled against him, breath caught, lips a whisper away from his. And that's where the world seemed to hold its breath. His hand still held my wrist, not tightly, but with a weight that was impossible to ignore. I could feel the steady pulse beneath his fingertips, each beat quickening the longer we stood locked in that fragile, dangerous space. My breath came uneven, shallow, the kind that betrayed me no matter how still I tried to stand. He tilted his head slightly, leaning closer, and the warmth of his breath brushed my cheek. My lips parted instinctively, not in words, but in anticipation. He noticed, of course he did, and his smile curved slow and deliberate, a silent tease. The air between us grew heavy, so charged it felt like it could spark at any second. He shifted just enough that his chest grazed mine, a fleeting contact, but it sent a tremor through me. My free hand lifted halfway, almost touching him, then hesitated midair. The restraint only made the need sharper, the ache more unbearable. "You're quiet," he murmured, voice low, almost playful, as though daring me to answer. His lips hovered near my ear, so close I could feel the vibrations of his words travel down my spine. I laughed softly, breath catching in the sound. "Maybe I'm waiting to see what you'll do next." The game was dangerous now, and he knew it. His thumb traced a slow line over the inside of my wrist, tender, deliberate, making it harder to think of reasons why this was wrong. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, faster with every second he didn't let me go. His gaze dropped, almost lazily, to my mouth. He didn't move further, didn't claim the space, but the way he lingered there, breathing me in, was enough to make my entire body lean toward him. For a moment, I swore the world tilted. My hand, trembling but bold, touched the edge of his shirt, a soft brush of fingertips against fabric. He stilled instantly, eyes snapping to mine, fire sparking in the silence between us. The pause stretched, unbearable, both of us waiting for someone to give in. And then, just as his lips hovered close enough that I could feel their heat, a sound broke the spell. A door creaked somewhere in the house. We froze, caught, breathless, on the very edge of what might have been. The creak of the door had broken the moment, but only for a breath. The silence that followed was heavier, sharper, like the pause after thunder when you're waiting for the rain to start. His grip on my wrist loosened, though not completely. When his eyes met mine, the spark hadn't faded, it had only darkened, smoldering with something unsaid. "Maybe we should stop," I whispered, though even I didn't believe the words. He tilted his head, studying me, that smirk tugging at his lips again. Instead of pulling away, he reached for the bottle of wine on the dresser, pouring into a single glass. He offered it to me, his fingers brushing mine as he passed it, the contact deliberate. "You first," he said. His voice was low, teasing, like a challenge wrapped in courtesy. I took the glass, my hand trembling just enough that the liquid swayed. I lifted it, eyes locked on his, and sipped. The taste was rich, sharp, but what I really tasted was the way his gaze never left my mouth. When I lowered the glass, he plucked it from my hand and drank from the same spot my lips had touched. A quiet, deliberate claim. My chest tightened. The act was simple, ordinary even, but it felt like a line being drawn, and crossed. I laughed, too breathless, and turned away as if to regain control. But he was faster. His hand brushed my hip lightly, guiding me back toward him. "Don't run," he murmured, so close the words warmed the skin beneath my ear. The radio, forgotten on the shelf, crackled with a soft tune, slow, steady, aching. He seized the moment, sliding the glass aside and offering his hand with mock formality. "Dance with me." I almost refused. Almost. But something in his eyes, half daring, half pleading, pulled me in. My fingers slipped into his, and suddenly, we were moving. His other hand rested at the small of my back, heat seeping through fabric, holding me just enough to remind me he could close the distance whenever he wanted. I laid my hand on his shoulder, my body betraying me by swaying closer with every step. The dance was slow, deliberate torture. Our faces hovered inches apart, breaths mingling, every turn bringing us chest to chest before pulling us back. His thumb traced idle circles along my waist, each one sending sparks low through my body. And then he leaned closer, his lips brushing the shell of my ear as he whispered, "You're mine in this moment, and you know it." Jealousy flared sharp in me, memories of the way he had smiled at another earlier, how easily he could play this game with someone else. I pressed closer, almost defiantly, meeting his challenge with one of my own. The steps slowed. The song nearly ended. His hands slid higher along my back, pulling me flush against him. Our eyes locked again, and this time there was no pretense, no retreat, just inevitability. I could feel it, the kiss was coming, undeniable, unstoppable, and then the music cut off, plunging the room into silence. The silence after the music stopped was louder than the song itself. We didn't move. We just stood there, caught in the gravity of what we'd built, breathing the same heavy air, waiting for one of us to break. His hand slid higher, curving firmly at my waist, holding me with a certainty that erased all the teasing pauses from before. I felt my body melt toward him, not in surrender but in recognition, like this had been waiting beneath the surface all along. He lowered his forehead to mine, the gesture disarmingly tender after all the sharp edges we'd walked through. My eyes closed instinctively, the warmth of him pressing into every thought I'd tried to silence. I could feel his breath against my lips, the soft tremor in it betraying he was just as undone as I was. "You feel it too," he whispered, voice breaking into something raw, something dangerous. It wasn't a question. I opened my eyes, meeting his in the sliver of space left between us. They weren't playful anymore. They were serious, almost pleading, as if asking me to admit something I wasn't supposed to. My hand lifted on its own, sliding along his jaw, fingers trembling as they brushed the faint stubble there. The contact unraveled us both. His grip at my waist tightened, his other hand threaded into mine, anchoring me as though the world would fall apart if he let go. Every breath we shared was heavier, hotter, filling the space where words failed. And then, just as the inevitability hung on the edge, something shifted. His voice, low and almost broken, confessed, "It wasn't supposed to be you." The words sliced through the haze, sharp, disorienting. I pulled back slightly, searching his face, my chest rising faster with the weight of what he'd revealed. Who was it supposed to be? The question burned, but his hand didn't release me. If anything, he pulled me closer, as though the admission only deepened the hold we had on each other. The danger was different now, not just desire, but secrets we hadn't spoken, temptations layered with truths we hadn't faced. Our foreheads still pressed, our lips still a breath apart, the last restraint trembling at the edge of breaking, and that's where the moment held us, suspended between confession and collapse. His words lingered in the air, "It wasn't supposed to be you," but neither of us moved. We stood forehead to forehead, our breaths tangled, our hearts racing like we'd already gone too far, yet still holding back. My hand stayed against his jaw, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of something deeper than either of us could admit. Slowly, his grip softened at my waist. Not gone, just less insistent, as though he was reminding himself we couldn't tumble over the edge, not tonight. His eyes opened, and when they met mine again, there was no smirk, no teasing. Just honesty, stripped bare. I smiled faintly, though my chest ached with everything left unsaid. "Then maybe it was always supposed to be me," I whispered, my voice steadier than I felt. For a long moment, we stayed like that, locked in a silence that wasn't empty, but full. Then he drew me into him, arms wrapping around me in a hug that was anything but casual. It was lingering, deliberate, the kind of embrace that held too much meaning to brush off. My head rested against his chest, and I could hear the uneven rhythm of his breathing, matching my own. When we finally pulled apart, his hand slid down my arm until only our fingertips touched. He let go slowly, reluctantly, like a man setting down something precious he wasn't ready to lose. Our eyes caught one last time, his gaze holding a question, mine giving an answer I didn't dare say aloud. The lamp's warm glow cast long shadows around us, and for a second, I thought of how it began, his hand on my waist, his touch lingering too long, the zipper moving too slowly. Somehow, we had gone full circle, only now the weight of what almost happened carried a secret gravity neither of us could ignore. He smiled then, small but knowing, the kind of smile that promised this wasn't over. And as I turned away, my lips curved with the same truth. The night had ended, but the story hadn't. Not really.